that's we really appreciate that. That was really great to get the insight into your world and where it originated from and where you're at right now. There's a lot of questions that have come through. I just wanted to start off with one of my own, be a little bit selfish, if that's okay. It seems like through that, from my perspective, that when we live in such a digital-driven world, and I think lockdown has accelerated that massively, and it's benefited what I'm trying to do right along. Obviously, we can do this with people all over the country and further afield. But with a lot of your work, it seems so much driven by real life. It's the relationships you've built with people. It's the knowledge that you gain from collaborators and partners. Do you find that really fuels your imagination and where the work comes from? It's not just like firing it off to a digital printer you've never met. You can't sort of judge the quality or what you might get back. It's all about being hands-on and in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of physical connection with the work, where it comes from, the letterpress type, how it gets made, primarily screen print, and then the finished product is something that, I like to have my hands on throughout the entire process, really. And I think that sort of physical connection equates to the sort of mental connection through the work. And, then I'm thinking about what I'm saying with the phrases that I use and, positioning the work out into the world as well. And how all that is kind of vitally important, and it kind of gives meaning to the work. I think for me, the work is all about meaning and trying to get my experience and my ideas out into the world and connect with other people who've have got similar experiences, or asking similar kind of questions, really. So I think even though I'm grounded within graphic design, I think I've kind of detached myself away from working in more of a commercial setting, where now more consciously I just want to be seen as an artist, really, who kind of uses the language of graphic design, but the intention is to speak of like bigger messages and ask bigger questions, really.
Yeah. Do you have to be then conscious about where that's placed each time you create something? If it's going to be a print-based thing, or saying leads on the wall, if that was a different setting, would you maybe have projected the concept? Does it have to be placed in the correct environment?
Yeah. Well, I'm working on a mural in Liverpool at the moment, that's due to be installed in the spring. And with that piece of work, I've used a different phrase, and it kind of talks about the city in a different way as well. And it's kind of, I think you have to understand where the work's going to be and the context of the work and who's going to see it and who's going to relate to it. So I think I don't know, but I see a lot of work made by people who kind of, I don't know, it's almost just like, it's just like a stream of stuff that comes out, and there's no real context to anything else apart from itself. So that's something I kind of really want to avoid. I want to make work that's specific to a place or a moment, or or a group of people or something.
And I also presume there has to be a bit of a balance in that, depending on where you are in your own journey, isn't there? If you're starting out, it's very noisy right now, isn't it, to sort of get heard or seen.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to sacrifice maybe the brief or the project to sort of get by, but maybe you get a bit more of a privileged position. I'm not necessarily saying that's what you're at, but with time and reputation, you're afforded sometimes projects that allow you to be more selective.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's part of the sort of career progression. When I was in my 20s, I was kind of just like experimenting with everything, really, and kind of like trying everything out and going down as many avenues as possible. And I think in my 30s, I was working in a commercial context, and I kind of, I had a very specific kind of pigeonhole that I was working in. And I think in my 40s, I was kind of trying to break out of that bit. And now I'm in my 50s. It's almost like all that experience that I've had over the years, it's kind of all those building blocks have really kind of come together. And where I am now is I think I'm producing work that is, I suppose like most valid work that I've produced throughout my career, really. And I think it's, you know, for me, it's something that I've always wanted to progress and to kind of build on that experience, but then build on work that, you know, feels meaningful and, you know, gives my life meaning, really, you know, without sounding too dramatic. But, you know, it's, you know, I just love what I do. You know, I do it every day. I think about it all the time, and, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with what I do. And it's, you know, it's afforded me some amazing experiences. You know, I've been able to travel a lot and kind of work with people in lots of different places, and it's I think it's all part of just having that kind of like singular sort of, you know, kind of vision of where you want to be and how you want to work, really.
And I think through time, a lot of the people I speak to is what happens with age, traditionally becomes a little bit more comfortable with what you produce and who you are. You don't sort of, you know, overly think it. We all think about it 24/7, unfortunately, wake up in the middle of the night with ideas, you know, all that sort of cliche. But as time goes on, you sort of just relax into who you are a little bit more, and your work sort of reflects that, I think. And you don't, you know, you don't overanalyze it too much, or, you know, create it for the internet and then delete it because it's not fitting within a specific, you know, grid shape or whatever it might be. You know, you do all that procrastinating when you're younger, then you actually find out, you know, what you want to create, which is reflects in your work perfectly, I think. Let me just move on to the questions, Anthony, that people have posted. Chris has just asked about the work has a foundation in statements that have become iconic. Do you have a favourite statement of your own, and do you have a quote of somebody else's that you wish you would have created?
Yeah, good question. I think, well, you know, work hard and be nice to people. That's one that kind of pretty much started the whole thing, really, back in the early 2000s. So, and it's still still something that I kind of I think is important. Maybe, you know, there's still questions around working hard, but or, you know, working smart, or, you know, not working 24/7. But I think for me, it's that phrase is more about sticking to your guns and, you know, doing things on your own terms, and but still being, you know, a positive and, you know, decent, happy human being, and, you know, treating other people with respect and all that stuff. So yeah, so I think as a phrase, I think that encapsulates a lot of what I still believe in. I think a phrase that somebody else has come up with. I don't know, really. Probably
There's too many, isn't there? I don't think there's
live, laugh, love, you know. Or, this kitchen is for dancing, and, you know, I think it's funny. It's like, you know, the sort of the proliferation of text-based art has been quite interesting to kind of watch over the years, you know, and how, because, like, you know, years ago people wouldn't put just a phrase on their wall, you know, you know, kind of having like text on the wall is something that people didn't have years ago, and now it's something that is like, you know, super cliched, really.
And it's sort of, it ties in with like the rise of like home decorations, isn't it? And, you know, people just feeling the freedom to be themselves again, isn't it? You know, we're living in that age where you could plaster your walls with 1,000 frames if you want to, whatever you want, as opposed to what trends sort of say.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose also when you reference music quite a lot in your early, you know, early career, or even before your career, you know, with doing band logos, etc. You know, there's a ton of inspiration there, isn't there, from song lyrics and, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I've just worked on a project for Bob Dylan, and, you know, that was incredible. Like, translating the lyrics and, you know, into, you know, my type, and but yeah, that was song lyrics and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, massively influential.
I think that might be the first and last time someone dropped that they've just worked with Bob Dylan into a conversation.
Yeah.
As you do.
Personal friend.
Yeah. Just moving on to these questions again. Sandrine has asked about your the building of your design archive and how you would like people to use it.
Yeah. So that website XYZ, it's out there as a resource, so you can download all the imagery from it. And I've worked. I did a project with students in Sheffield. They did a whole series of work based on that. And I did some work with an artificial intelligence researcher in Germany. So he kind of used the resource in a completely different way. So yeah, it's just out there just to give, I've got all this reference material and I love it, and I just wanted to kind of share it really, and kind of let people, look at it and see what it kind of sparks off with them really.
Yeah, and I think that also adds to the push that I'm keen on, but I know a lot of other people are, about making much more transparency and allowing people to access things that would traditionally just be hidden behind studio doors, wouldn't they? And
Yeah.
never see the light of day, and sometimes that can feel quite mysterious and a bit guarded.
Yeah.
It's good to have
I kind of, it's like making the process of making my stuff is kind of integral to the work really, so the physical aspect of like setting type or screen printing, that's kind of the actual physical making is part of the work as well.
Definitely. And then Chloe's just asked about what was the toughest part of your career to date.
I suppose like each stage has its own kind of challenges really, kind of when you start out you're trying to find people to work with, or who will kind of give you work, and then you kind of move along a bit, and then it's like choosing the right kind of work to do and the right avenues to go down, and then work dries up and you think it's all over. That still happens. It's like last year I had a real, like the middle of last year I had a real quiet patch for a few months, and you kind of think, is that it? Has everyone kind of moved on and forgotten about me now? But then you get an email asking you to do a project, and then it all kind of kicks off again and you're all fine again. So I think it's just it's those ups and downs, and when you are having a bit of a quiet patch, then that's time to kind of like look at different ways of working, or getting your work in front of different people, and just kind of keeping the enthusiasm and the motivation going. Even that can be hard at times as well.
And it sounds terribly horrible on you, but I think for a lot of people watching this, to hear that you have those thoughts, those moments, it's sort of, it sort of makes you realise that it's not just us, or everybody on this call might think that it's not just me that happens to. It happens to somebody with clout, reputation, a huge amount of work, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I think, well, you work really hard to get to a certain part of your career, but once you've reached that stage, you just have to keep on working and keep pushing, and to kind of stay relevant, or to still have your work kind of like valued by people. I think I think you can never really rest on your laurels at all. You have to continually sort of be moving forward, and sticking at it.
Without sounding like a Premier League football manager, is it about just believing in the process? Is it always just keeping that philosophy of, like, I know what I do is it's right, in the sense that it's right for me, it fulfills what I want to do right now. You will eventually want to be involved or commission it or buy it.
It's just like sticking to your guns and thinking, well, something's going to turn up. I think it's just like doing interesting things and getting your work out there, whether it's through social media, or trying to get magazines to write about you, and do interviews, and chatting to lots of people on a Wednesday morning. It's just like you've just got to do stuff all the time, and keep that energy and that kind of flow going.
So is that your response to sort of quiet periods then? It's to keep busy, it's to keep pushing forward, or do you sort of hide in an armchair and worry about the future? Do you go on holiday? What is it that you look to do?
Last year when I was having that quiet patch, I just like our fun, just like spoke to people in the industry whose opinion I trust and stuff like that. I was like saying, well, how's it going for you? Have you been quiet? Am I the only one? And, it kind of turns out that especially middle of last year, a lot of people really quiet, and, everyone was kind of pretty much in the same boat really. So, that kind of like put my mind at ease that, I hadn't been chucked on the scrap heap of history. I was still, people are still interested in what I was doing. So I think around that time, I started working on the exhibition that I had in the autumn, the big ampersand screen prints and stuff like that. So you just got to be proactive, and, there's no one point where you think, right, I've made it now, I can just sit back and relax, because as soon as you start doing that, then things start tailing off naturally.
Yeah. Bradley's asked about, do you have a bank of fonts that you like to work with and often return to, or do you still look for new ones, and where do you look if so?
Yeah, I pretty much, I use all the kind of like wood type letters, kind of typefaces that I've got access to. But yeah, last week I proofed a new font that I haven't really used that much before, so I kind of proof it and then scan it in a really high resolution and start playing around with that. So yeah, it's good to kind of like adding new elements to the mix now and again. So yeah, and I'm always looking for, kind of like stencil typefaces and, bits of ephemera that can, suggest, a new kind of like letter form or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Alex has just put about the influence of political thinking. Is there anything in that with your work? Is there any point where you're creating maybe things that are related to current affairs or statements, as opposed to just phrases that you find?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think all my work is political. I think it's got a kind of real connection with the way that I see the world and my natural political leanings. So yeah, I've done lots of work with charities and pressure groups, and I've worked with Extinction Rebellion, and produced work that was used in protest and stuff like that. So it's kind of your work has to be connected with what's going on in the world. It's it's like, I'm really interested in politics and how things are going at the moment, and how we can have our own individual voices in that process. And I think that's something that kind of relates back to how you want to live your life, and whether you see yourself as part of a community, bigger community, that your actions affect what everybody else's lives are like and stuff like that. So it's so yeah, I think you've got to be honest about the world that we live in and the work that you make in response to that.
It's always played a huge part in that, hasn't it? And across all forms of music, theatre, film, even all the way down to placards that are hand. I love the idea, someone just put a pot of paint and a brush, and whatever the message might be, they put that out there, and it's always a form of creativity, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And I think the way that the world is now, there's a lot to talk about, and a lot of the work that that I make is is concerned with all those things. Maybe sometimes it's not specifically linked to any one thing, and I think sometimes like broader messages of human connection and I think I'm kind of more valid than any targeting any specific politician. It's kind of they come and go, but people remain.
There's something from Henry that I'd written down myself while you were talking about, because your work is intentionally simple in its messaging and its direction, the techniques aren't. Do you worry about imitators? And have you ever had to face it and deal with those? There's been quite a lot of commentary this week about a certain branding project created by an agency which has got a little bit out of hand, I think, which is, it basically relates to other things that have been created in a similar vein, which are virtually impossible to avoid at times. Have you faced that, like you mentioned a second ago about the rise of letter form driven design? you know, you seem quite relaxed and laid back sort of type of guy. Are there moments where, you know, you look warily at other things and, you know, worry where that's come from?
Yeah, tons of stuff. And, you know, it's like I see my influence in lots of things, but then, you know, I've in turn, I'm influenced by lots of things that I see as well. And it's all kind of, you know, we're all in the same creative soup, and we're all, you know, we're all kind of finding nourishment from lots of different things. I think, unless it's like, you know, a kind of cynical, blatant rip-off, then, you know, I'm pretty okay with, you know, people kind of like referencing my work, or kind of saying, you know, kind of aiming to make the same kind of connection. Really, it's like, you know, I'm kind of, yeah, I think, you know, personally, you know, if I see somebody, you know, referencing what I do, then, you know, I see it as a compliment, really. So, you know, it's kind of, and yeah, unless it's like, you know, they're obviously, you know, doing it in an awful way, then but even then, you know, you kind of think, well, you know, it's just part of, I suppose, part of having your work out there, and kind of part of being successful, that people are going to draw influence from what you do. So yeah, but you know, I'm always going to be one step ahead. So
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's a good way to look at it. And also the point of like this talk perfectly illustrates to me the purpose and the method behind it, which cannot be replicated. It's, you know, that reason why you do it is
yeah,
different. If someone was churning out replicas, you know, through digital printing, etc., you know, that's taking it to a next different level, isn't it? As opposed to, you know, somebody else that's just influence, like anybody, like you say, anybody else. Grace has just mentioned, do you prefer working, after seeing the Leeds piece, do you prefer working in larger or smaller scale?
any scale really. Yeah, whether it's a postcard or the side of a building, you know. I think it's just whatever medium is the best way of getting the work out there. So, but yeah, obviously working at scale, it looks impressive, and people kind of think it's, yeah, it's not everybody who gets to have their work on the side of a building like that. So yeah, that is. So yeah, I do like quite monumental pieces of work, but then I also like, you know, a little sticker or a badge or a postcard. You know, I think it's equally valid, really.
I think it's really symbolic, though, of the respect for a lot of creativity in the public realm now, isn't it? That, you know, street art and, you know, all of the forms of creativity in public spaces is just nice just to see
Yeah,
those traditionally empty spaces used for, you know, much more interesting ideas, because normally the public spaces can be quite, you know, a bit bland, can't they, because of councils and their purpose.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's, you know, it's that whole argument about, you know, kind of creatives moving into a cheap area and then making it into this kind of vibrant, interesting space, and then, you know, big business then comes in and kind of takes over and makes it boring again. So the
Yeah.
creatives move to a different place. You know, I don't know whether that narrative is that accurate for a lot of places, but I just know it's like, you know, if you go into, you know, into an environment that's like interesting with lots of, you know, kind of vibrant, interesting stuff going on, then it's, you know, you're, yeah, kind of gets you going, really, doesn't it? Kind of gets you
Yeah.
excited about stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Ali has just put, it's not a question, but it's a great comment. I was thinking this myself when we first connected last year. The way that you, the portfolios, you know, the photography that you've got throughout your work, and that must have been something very conscious. Get somebody that represents you through, you know, through collaboration again.
Yeah,
That must be really important to you, because obviously you can have flat files like you've got your animations and like you started off with today of you know, with the original works,
yeah,
but seeing things in situ such as that Leeds one and the galleries is so important, isn't it, to reflect its impact?
yeah, kind of, yeah, I work with photographers and filmmakers to document the work, and it's, I think it just kind of elevates it to a bit of a different level. You know, when you're working with amazing photographers who capture something that, you know, capture the work in a way that you wouldn't have envisaged yourself. So yeah, and they always come back with really interesting, you know, angles on the work and stuff like that. So so yeah, so I've got a kind of like regular roster of people that I work with who, you know, who kind of yeah, I've always been really happy to work with those people. So yeah, it's cool.
Brilliant. I think this will probably be really relevant to a lot of people. Ellie has just asked about tips for getting noticed, building a portfolio for somebody that started out. You know, like when you started out, it's about how do you get to that point where you've got a network where you can call upon magazines when you were quiet last year, etc. Is that just reaching out to people and just trying to connect with as many?
Yeah, well, it all starts like with one person. Like when you're at college, like a visiting lecturer might come in, or you might see somebody speak about the work, and then you kind of connect with them, and then they recommend a couple of people to speak to, and then you start building that sort of network. It's an organic thing, and I think actually physically meeting up with people, or going to visit people's studios and stuff like that, that's still incredibly important. It's great to connect online like this, but yeah, nothing beats being in somebody's space. If it's like a woodworker, smelling the sawdust, or kind of like having that kind of physical connection. But yeah, it's just a matter of kind of being open to new opportunities and new connections with people, and kind of making the most of those new connections as well, kind of cultivating friendships and spending time kind of like looking at what other people are doing and how they're doing it and how you fit into the world and all that stuff. But that stuff takes time. It takes years to build up those networks and those connections. But yeah, those first few connections are vitally important. Like how those people can open doors into different networks and things. So yeah, you've got to be on the lookout for those gatekeepers in your life.
Yeah. And I say it quite a lot. I feel like I repeat myself when I do these talks, but you can never complete it. You don't get to the end of your life and sort of, it's not a computer game. It's just continually changes, isn't it? And so do you. And you've got to sort of move with the times and shift with what's, what you feel personally, don't you? So it's
new people come along, and you connect with them in different ways, and and then people that you've worked with in the past like go off and do something else and sort of disappear for a bit and then kind of come back, and it's just it's people, isn't it? Being people.
Yeah, it's life. Life moves on. Baz has just asked. I apologise if I missed anybody. But Baz has just asked about: your style is so iconic and recognisable? Have you ever felt, or do you feel hindered by that? Is there moments where you want to try something completely different, or do you do that and it's just never seen?
Yeah, I think for me it's always been an exploration of typography and words, and kind of all those simple connections. And I think it's that there's so much within that world that I still want to explore and still want to play with and experiment with. And I think it's I've got my visual reference and my visual landscape, and it's like how different elements of those ideas kind of come together in kind of new and different ways. So yeah, there's still a lot to explore. And I think the more you become specialized in a specific area, that you can uncover more and more interesting things that if you just like looking at stuff on a surface level and not really delving that much into the background, then you're not going to uncover those kind of new ways of working and stuff. This is what I do and this is how I do it. So yeah, but I still love it.
Yeah, 100%. The last couple, Anthony, Liam has asked, when you're in the concept stages of developing ideas, how much of it is influenced or restricted by the production process, and how much of the initial design alters when you get your hands on the workshop? So I presume that's a case of two angles, isn't it? Really, do you feel restricted to sort of think this is what I know is capable, and then when you're there, does that alter and evolve?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it depends what you're doing. Like if I'm printing a poster, then it's going to be a specific size, and how many colours can afford to print you know, all that stuff. It's kind of like you need one eye on the kind of like production budget, and you know, whether you're going to use block foil or screen print or wood type. You know, you kind of, so all those decisions kind of get made when I'm working on a new project. But then yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the process kind of dictates what you do and how you work and stuff like that. So yeah.
I think a lot of that is trial and error, isn't it? You know, that's, again, knowledge is built up by actually doing the thing in the first place. That, especially when it comes to printing, like you say, I think not many, it's become a little bit of a dying art form. I don't, you know, in terms of it being used mass commercially,
Yeah.
like what your work is, it makes such a knock-on effect to the overall cost, maybe to a customer buying off your website or a commercial customer. If you're adding in foils and all other bits of different types of finishing, you've got to go through it to understand, haven't you?
Yeah, I try and keep my prints as affordable as possible, you know, and so like the production is sort of reflected in that, really, that it's, you know, most of them are one color print, and you know, I use, you know, good quality paper and all that stuff. So yeah, it's, you have to kind of keep one eye on budgets as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a shame, but it's true. Final question, seems we're coming up right towards the hour, from Deb. It's a little bit of a funner one. Have you got a favourite ampersand?
Yeah, well, you know, ampersands are the sort of quite a cheeky letter form, aren't they? You know, they stand apart from the alphabet, and I think it's when type designers get to design an ampersand, they can, you know, make it as kind of quirky and sort of strange as possible. But yeah, the one that that's behind me, that stencil ampersand, I really like. And yeah, but yeah, I've got a soft spot for ampersand. I think, like a lot of graphic designers, you know, it's one of their favorite characters. So yeah.